Welcome back to Colors Over Crutch. My name is Max Sternberg, also known as Wounded Satellite. I'm joined once again by my amazing, covered for my ass last week co-host, Max P, the Florian guy. Can't call him Italian Man right now because the deck is in shambles. How fucking dare you? How you doing today, Max?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing all right. I'm doing fine. Welcome back from the mountains. You were in Utah, right?
Yeah,
Utah.
I wasn't in the mountains.
It was rocks.
Why did you tell everyone I was in the mountains?
To me, mountains and rocks are the same fucking thing. You're climbing giant, rock things. Trying not to die.
I'll give you a picture that you can put on the screen right now of the kind of stuff I was doing, of me just like crack climbing in the desert.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
So what we're gonna do today is a little different, right? We talked about this a few weeks ago, and we said we would do this. We're gonna do it. We put a thread in our Discord where we basically said, "Hey, we're gonna do Q&A. Put your questions in here," and we got a lot of questions. We actually got a lot of questions. So we're gonna do that. I don't think there's anything else we're gonna do today, but that's gonna be pretty much it.
It is.
And I think there'll be some good.
It's the Q&A
right?
episode. It's the Q&A.
Yeah, it's the Q&A episode. Yeah, that's it. We'll go through some of those questions. We picked some good ones. I think we'll have some good conversations, around them. It'll be fun. With that, I mean, let's just jump right into this stuff, man.
Yeah.
So the first one is from Nova Commander. He asked this question on our Discord server, and he said, "What is your advice for a turbo player who is switching over to a mid-range strategy?" Well, you're kind of a mid-range strategy who switched over to turbo, right?
Me?
Yeah.
I didn't switch over to turbo. I got convinced to brew one turbo deck and play Ob Nixilis, and then I've played Rogsai and Timna Dargo and some other stuff now. I would say if you're actually in a turbo mindset and that's all you've played, when you are a turbo player, you're really focused on having a hand that directly represents a win attempt a lot of the time. And so you're really used to kind of having the complete picture in your opener versus something that's more like, I'm going to grind card advantage and trust a little bit. I think that you're switching over to a mid-range. You need to be able to learn how to utilize value hands a little bit better and trust in that value to eventually get you to a win. And you do need to be a little bit better at picking windows. I think with Storm players or Turbo players and those really proactive shells, obviously picking your window is important and recognizing the context of the game is important, but there's definitely a much higher correlation between I'm just sending this in the first few turns because on average, that's when people have less mana up for interaction. So I think if you're pivoting towards the mid-range, you need to understand how to grind value, how to grind advantage, and how to still optimize those windows to shoot your win attempt. Because mid-range decks in the modern day are still very proactive win attempt focused in what they are doing. Their actual combo is still something they can snipe. They just don't want to go for it all the time.
Yeah, I think that the secret is that, switching from turbo to mid-range isn't switching at all. It's just changing when you're doing what you're doing in a lot of ways. You're still a turbo deck. You're still looking to combo off and win the game out of nowhere very quickly. It's just that instead of just trying to send it on turn 1 or turn 2, you're like, okay, I'm going to grind a little bit. I'm going to draw some cards. I'm going to set up. And then when the window presents itself, I'm going to seize it and I'm going to win. Mm-hmm. The more you tilt towards, if you think of it like a, what do you call it? Like a spectrum, right? Where on one side you got turbo, on the other side you have control, right? It's how fast you're trying to, go for it is really the difference, right? But you're still, even in control, you're still looking for that explosive turn where you suddenly win the game. Like if you're playing Talion, we're trying to drop Hullbreaker Horror and go for it eventually, right? The more towards the turbo end of the spectrum you are, the faster you can seize a window, basically. So you're trading the ability to win earlier for the ability to maybe have the ability to stop other people from winning a little bit more, so you're less likely to get blown out. If you're turn order simulator, if you will, but you're still doing the same thing at the end of the day. You're still exploding and winning through a window. And
just to kind of go off of that as well, I could see people just from what you said saying, well, why wouldn't I just play the turbo strategy then? What's better about the mid-range? What's better about the control? And I think it's going along that spectrum. There's a similar increase in, I would say, expected EV of the win attempt you're throwing down in like a calculated risk format with how long you're waiting. So the turbo decks are trying to go for it quickly and snipe that win, and their calculated EV on that attempt is it's much easier to stop if you have the interaction for it, versus mid-range decks are trying to often land that kind of silence effect to push through, and then control decks are trying trying to just go for this, like, I have 8 counter spells in hand. What are you possibly going to do about this type 1 attempt? So
yeah, it's also less susceptible to. It's also less susceptible to, like I said, turn order simulator, where like, ah, shit, you're playing a turbo strategy and you're in 4th seat. That's not good. That's not good if there's another turbo deck in 1st seat. Like, it's just very inconsistent, like very spiky. You know, mid-range smooths a lot of that out, and like, you know, it's just much more consistent to not lose games, put it that way. You know, and my advice, like the actual question, like what to think about when you're switching to mid-range, learn some patience, right? Build that win in your hand instead of just throwing it on the battlefield, and see how long you can safely hold it. So sit there and see how long you can hold a win attempt in your hand, you know, in practice games. Make sense?
Makes sense. I agree with that. Yeah, learn patience. Learn to grind. Learn to gain value.
Yeah, and test that patience. Like testing games, hold that win attempt in your hand for a couple turns and see how it goes.
Mm-hmm. Oh, just a random thing that just popped in my head that is entirely separate that I just want to bring up. Whoever stole my Melanzana hoodie at Punt City 3, fuck you. This is my new one. And it's not the Simic one. It's now the Rakdos one, but I also have a Simic one. I got a vintage one off the rack. But yeah, just to that person, if you ever see this, like, get fucked.
You heard it here first, folks. Get fucked.
Yeah, get fucked, dude. I hope your top deck is gemstones every turn 1 for the rest of your life.
You want to do the next one here? Read the next question.
Yeah. The next question here, with some spelling errors, by Wise Games, is how would one go through picking a CDH deck? Do you recommend going off meta or trying to bring their own favorite deck into CDH first? And I know there's another question very similar to this later down the line, so we might just try and jump down to that one and connect them if possible.
Sure.
But when you're picking a CDH deck, I mean, always there's the question of, are you first getting into the format, or are you someone who's already developed in the format and has that breadth of knowledge? I get asked the question a lot, which is very similar in like, do you just pick the best deck, or is it okay to go off meta if it's a deck you're comfortable with? I'm a big believer that as long as you have good Magic fundamentals and you know what you're doing really, really well, it does not matter what you're playing, to an extent. Obviously, if I'm talking like really crappy casual commander that is just entirely unviable versus blue farm, like there's a clear difference there. But if you're talking a deck that has a shred of viability and you are a master of that strategy and you think that you can really hammer down on what that deck does, I think it is better to play a deck that you're really comfortable with, and you will have more success with that. And especially transitioning from, let's say, casual to CDH or getting into the format, you know, if you're someone who's like, oh man, I've been playing, I don't know, Obnixilis is a common casual commander. You know what I mean? Like if it's a commander that has a level of viability, you know, if your mono green Selvala is a really good example. Like, it's not a top tier deck, but Sylvan plays it like a master. You know what I mean? Like, there are decks that are not top tier viable, but when you are just really good with them and you can grow with them and get comfortable with them, Naestrom with Tameshi is like a very similar idea as well. That wasn't a deck that anyone would have viewed as a viable CDH deck not too long ago. You know, I think it's better to do what you're comfortable with. And when you talk about like off meta versus generic power, like, yes, there are downsides to playing something that's off meta because there's an obvious correlation between that deck being less generically powerful from what it's doing or card quality perspective. But what it does gain on a separate access over the on meta decks is Brewer's Advantage. And Brewer's Advantage is crazy because if people don't know what you're doing, you get away with so much bullshit.
Yeah, that's 100% true. I you know, my feeling is when you're first getting into it, like my suggestion is pick, you know, we talked about that spectrum a little while ago. You know, I recommend, is the question like, okay, how do you go about picking one? See, like, I'm not sure what your experience level here is when we're asking this question. So from my perspective, if you're just new to the format and you're trying to pick a CDH deck to start with, my recommendation is, if you think about that spectrum, you want to pick something in the middle, because something in the middle is going to let you experience both elements of the game, right? You're going to get to experience the control interaction piece. You're going to get to experience some of the turbo and comboing piece of it, right? And it gives you a chance to see which one you like better, which one you seem to do better. And, you know, you're going to want to tilt in that direction, whichever like you feel you enjoy more, because inevitably whatever you enjoy playing, you're going to play better. That's the way it works, right? Mm-hmm. Because if you hate the deck that you're playing, you're going to play like shit, right? Because you just get bored with it. You don't enjoy it. You're just not going to be as good on the deck, right? And at the end of the day, the deck that you're going to play best is the one that you breathe. You know, the one that you have played so much that, you know, you see your hand and you immediately know on the spot, is this a good hand? Like you may, like, okay, is it a good enough hand? But you know immediately at first glance, this is a good hand. You know immediately, like, okay, I know the line that this one card can lead me down. Those things come immediately. And that only comes when you put the hours in and the time in. And if you hate the deck, guess what? You're not going to put the time in because you fucking hate it. Right?
It's not fun.
Yeah. Now, in terms of, like, once you're experienced and you've decided what you like playing and you're trying to figure out, like, okay, what's the right CDH deck to take to a tournament? You know, I spend a lot of time thinking about, you know, what the current meta looks like, what decks am I going to run into, and I want to try to avoid decks that are particularly bad into the current meta, right? You know, so if everyone's on mid-range hell and we've got a billion blue decks, you know, I might not want to run something that tries to, you know, sort of slow explosion, like win turn 4, because turn 4 is too late to those metas, right? Yeah. I want something that's either going to get under them or is going to win the grind over time, right? So just kind of thinking like that.
Yeah, and I mean the question that connected to was later in the list was Pedro Davis OG, who said, are Fringe decks worth playing in the current meta? And I think the answer to that is absolutely yes, because you get the Brewer's advantage. Like you know, we see all of these random tournaments where we're like, holy shit, this weird off meta deck won the event, or this one made top 4. There's like one of those decks in most events a lot of the time, and that's because you get away with a lot of shit if you're playing a deck that people don't know what you're doing. If everyone is just used to playing Kinnan, Blue Farm, Sisay, Tivit, Najila on repeat, and then suddenly you show up with, you know, Grixis Marchesa or Rakdos the Muscle, like a new thing that people just don't really understand what the deck's doing yet, as long as it has a level of viability and the ability to win a CDH game, you get away with stuff because people don't have proper threat assessment against you.
Yeah, I also have a theory that I think, you know, we tend to think of the top decks in the format as being far and away the best, and you know, big gaps between them and some of the Fringe decks. And I think that the gap is a lot smaller than I think people realize.
We disagree.
I think
on
if
that.
I mean, that's fine. But if you're an excellent pilot, you know, high skill level, you can make up a lot of that ground very easily, right? And Brewer's advantage even helps more. So I think, you know, it's very viable to take a Fringe deck and be absolutely super successful with it if you pilot it well, because you know, unlike Max here, I don't think the gap is that huge. You know, sure, there's a difference between Fringe and trash, right? If you're trying to, you know, make, I don't know, freaking Wolf Tribal a CDH deck. That's,
I mean, we're talking like Fringe for like Sakashima Kadama. You know what I mean? Like a deck that can win the fucking game. Like that is a deck that can efficiently and confidently win the game, but it's not good.
Florian is a Fringe deck, right? And it is perfectly fine, right? I don't think the gap between Blue Farm and Florian is as big as people think it is. There's definitely a gap. I'm not saying there's not, but it's not as big as you think it is.
Sure. It's just 2 colors, yeah.
Colors are a crutch, man.
Colors are says the guy who was picking up Blue Farm
playing 3 colors right now.
Yeah, you're back on Mardu at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, I really love Tim Najeska. I want to play an event on Tim Najeska. That deck is so much fun. It's a turbo deck that I get to grind with. I love grinding.
Yeah, you know, you talk about the spectrum. It's between turbo and mid range, which tends to be my sweet spot most of the time. Actually.
Well, Tim Najeska specifically is a deck that's like, oh yeah, I can snipe turbo Mardu win attempts all the time, but I'm like so efficiently good at interacting and grinding. And I really love the play pattern of Tim Najeska specifically, where it plays an obscene amount of removal, but because it doesn't really have counter magic, whenever anything is important on the stack, you pass priority every time and make someone else use their interaction, and then you only deal with stuff if you have to when it hits the board, and you normally can. You know, like every time I go for win attempts against Jesse, he's always like, I have 3 pieces of removal for your Kinnan in hand. Can we just not do this right now?
Yeah. All right, next question. What do we got next? We got, let's see.
Tyler's question.
Tyler. Yeah, Tyler. So the question is, how often should you or do you play casually? Do you find it still fun to play lower power? How do you keep from overpowering a deck to keep it casual? I fucking can't. Like, I am so degenerate at this point that I can't make a casual deck. They all suck. They're all too powerful. No one wants to play with me in a casual table. It's really a pain in the ass. The only way I find... Yeah, I'm trying. I keep trying. Like, I keep trying to come up with something, and I just can't do it. Like, the best thing I could do is, like, I have my children pick out a commander for me that's really bad, and then I build the most powerful deck I can with a really bad commander, and that's like the best I could do.
So we have different philosophies with casual at this point. So with casual Magic, I do still play casual Magic, not often, but sometimes. Generally, my view at this point is I want to play casual with CDH players. Is my preference a lot of the time, because CDH players, when you find the right group for casual, or just like the right group for casual that understands that we don't actually give a shit about winning the game, we are here to have fun. When you play with CDH players, a lot of them at this point, when they do have casual decks, don't put the busted cards into them because we're so used to playing those in CDH. And so I think that that's a really good philosophy to have with playing casually and building a deck casually, is if you know a card is busted because you play it in CDH, don't put it in your casual deck. Don't do it. Like, you shouldn't have efficient 2-card combos with your commander in your casual deck. You shouldn't be playing Mana Crypt. You know, take out some of the tutors that just make it so efficient at winning the game. Like, take out your Eldritch Evolution, take out your Finale Devastation. You don't need those cards. And I think the biggest separation between casual and CDH is actually the mana rocks and the mana production, because in CDH we are able to so efficiently win the game when we gain significant card advantage because we have so much positive mana production. That's really the separating point, versus how many times have you been playing casually and you draw 15 cards from some busted interaction and you just like play a land, play an Arcane Signet, and cast one more thing because you don't have more mana. So keeping the efficient positive mana production out of your decks, keeping out the really busted efficient win attempts, and playing with the right people, I think is really, really important. And then also, like, I mean, I do busted shit in CDH all the time, and I love optimization. So trying to find something really dumb and stupid that's just fun and cool. So some of my favorite casual decks, obviously my favorite will always be Muldrotha, which was my first ever deck, and that doesn't really fit this philosophy because that is a grindy control deck, which I am a dick in, and that's like my higher power casual deck that I just love, and it's my baby. But the decks I play when I'm playing casual right now are like Tribal Ur Dragon, where I'm just doing a bunch of changeling fun garbage and doing like really neat, unique interactions with all, you know, Maskwood Nexus and all these effects. And like Tago Sakashima Is It Landfall is super, super fun, where you're just like going off with the fact that they're artifact tokens and doing a bunch of busted shit that way. Like, find something unique and cool that isn't something that would have any sense of viability in a competitive level, and build that and try and have fun with it and play with the right people.
I literally can't do that.
It's so much fun.
I have to play. Yeah, I can't do it. So I have to play precons, or I have to have my kids pick out a commander. That's all I got.
Yeah. The best thing is when you pull out a deck like Tago Sakashima, everyone's like, I want to see what this does.
But I understand. like, this all makes sense now. Now I understand. Like, when we do our like set reviews, like I understand why you pick the cards you pick now.
Yeah, makes a lot more sense. They're fun. I like fun cards. I want to do cool shit. I don't know. Not everything needs to be about winning.
Yeah, I'm too competitive. I can't do it.
The next question is, do you think that more 60-card pros getting into the format would be a good thing for the format? And do either of you have interest in trying to play competitive 60-card formats / playing the RCQ to Pro Tour grind?
This is from Barbecue Hoss, by the way.
Yes,
BBQ
Hoss. Thank you. I see positives and negatives. I think the positives of it is, when you look at a lot of people who are getting into CDH now, a lot of them come from Casual Commander, and that's their first Magic experience, is Casual Commander, where their friends got into it. And so a lot of those players, I'm not saying all, have not the best Magic fundamentals, I would say. So I think getting in some, but they understand like political and conversation and the social aspects of the game. So they're better on one front, but worse on like the fundamental part. 60-card pros and people from that side of the Magic world tend to have much better Magic fundamentals, better threat assessment, better understanding of how cards interaction works immediately, but they tend to be a little more behind on the political social side of things. So it adds a different aspect. I think it's a positive. I think getting more skilled players into the format is really, really good. I do think there is still a learning curve and adjustment with threat assessment, because when I've played against like really 60-card grinders before, they tend to sometimes really preemptively interact. It's something I've noticed, where they just like, oh, this gains value,
especially when they're playing control. Yeah, they control interactions. Yeah,
they're just like preemptively
interact earlier than we would. Yeah, because you know, a lot of really powerful effects feel like they're game ending, and you know, the fact that you have two other players who can interact introduces a whole new, you know, dynamic that they're just not used to. They're used to, like, if I don't respond, then no one's going to respond. Yeah. So getting into this mindset of, you have to read the table and figure out who has interaction and who doesn't, and try to sandbag your interaction and play the game of chicken with everybody else at the table. That's tough. That's harder, I think, for 60-card pros to get into. than people who've been playing like casual CDH the whole time or casual EDH the whole time.
Right.
I think like you said, the skill set gets much higher. People are gonna like sequence their spells better. They're going to make less mistakes, and that's going to lend themselves to a more interesting, a more highly skilled CDH community as a whole. And I think a lot of these pros are going to be fine. Like they're going to very quickly adjust to the political game. For the most part, there are going to be some, I think, who aren't going to like it because you have to talk in CDH. You have to talk. You can't sit there quietly and say nothing and let things happen. You will lose games. So learning to dive into that conversation and not just sit back, like you said, it's a big skill set to learn. And some will get it and some won't. Some guys will hate CDH. By the same token, like you asked us, would we consider getting into 60 card? Like I played a lot of 60 card before I came to CDH. I mostly like standard and modern. I'm not interested in going back to that because to me, what I enjoy most about CDH is the social aspect, the political aspect, and also the fact that there's so much room to brew in CDH. Whereas where you're in 60 card format, most of them there's a much sort of a cream on the top. There's the formats are largely solved. I wouldn't say completely solved. Decks do arise, here and there, but you can't. There's no like, you can't just, hey, I'm gonna brew 6 decks today, like, and sit down and go brew 6 decks, right? There's just not that much brewing space available in 60 card. At least I don't think so.
I think I don't
play it as much now. So
it's not that there isn't brewing space. Like I think if you ever watch people like Aspiring Spikes content, like this man is constantly brewing and cooking and changing things up and like trying everything, and it's awesome. I've watched some of his stuff and it's really, really cool, the stuff he comes up with from Modern and Pioneer and such. But the difference is when we talk in CDH about fringe viability and that brewer's advantage and what you can get away with because other people are interacting with each other and you can sneak through because they don't view you as much of a threat. I think you're much more likely to succeed on a fringe strategy in CDH, a 4-player format, than I don't see a fringe deck taking down an RCQ in a 1v1 format. You know what I mean? Like you can try and hope to have a good day, but the best decks are going to win those. So I think you lose that viability.
And the fact that it's not singleton, right? You get 4 copies of a card, which means you have a much smaller pool of cards you're building into the deck, right? You're going to have 6 cards, basically 4 copies of each, and that takes up a huge portion of the deck.
Yeah.
Right. So much different, style of brewing. So for me, it doesn't. The appeal isn't there. I still play it, every once in a while for fun, but I don't see myself ever, grinding a pro tour or anything like that.
I mean, the concept of me losing the ability to use Talk No Jutsu, that's dangerous. That's like my strongest move. But but I have really enjoyed 60 card when I've played it. It's not something. I think the biggest thing holding me back personally is proxies, where I am not a wealthy individual personally, and obviously like my Kinnan deck is blinged out now because I've won a lot of money from it and I've put that money into the deck, but I cannot just like afford to go spend $1,000 on a modern deck type thing, and they all cost at least that from everything more than that from everything I've seen. So the lack of ability to just like print out a deck and play it at an actual event really holds me back from that. And also the accessibility to just like, there's a huge community that plays Commander online. Like I can hop on any time of day and I can pretty much get a game. That's not something I can really do with Modern. I have to dedicate a time to go to an event and I have to spend the money on the real deck, and those hurdles I think are the biggest thing holding me back. But every single time that someone has had Modern or Legacy or Pioneer decks, or like one time when I was in Brazil, I just happened to go to a game store and there was a Pioneer event and I just borrowed a guy's shitty elf deck, and like I had a ton of fun with it, did really well. I did enjoy it. It's something I would be interested in trying if I had access to it at an event. If anyone local is like, hey, there's a Modern event, you can borrow my actual tier deck for it, like I would absolutely give it a try and run it, and I'm sure I'd have a blast. But it's not something I'm like eagerly looking to get into.
Yep. Okay. All right. Moving on. Next question. So this is a good one. I like this question. So this is from Arquimedes. Is that how you say it? Arquimedes.
Let me look.
How do you see the future of the format CEDH, specifically if WOTC starts to get more and more into it? And they are getting more and more into it. So it's a good question.
Yeah.
So if you notice, there was a over in Europe, there's it's called the Path to Lisbon. There's the European Championship that's going on. There's basically a circuit. I don't know what to call it. Not a circuit, but a gauntlet. I don't know what it is, but you have to win events to qualify for the championship, and that's been going on. And WOTC actually reached out to the people who are running that and said, hey, we want to get involved. We want to look at running CDH basically. And the first thing that comes to mind when they do that is the conversation you just had, which is proxies. Yeah. Because if WOTC is running events, there's not going to be proxies. That's just the long and short of it. And I think there's still room for there to be CDH proxyless, but it has to be the exception and not the rule, right?
Yeah.
There's room for those events to exist, but the community needs to be able to have proxy events in order to continue flourishing and growing, right? Because as much as we've grown, as big as we've gotten, we still haven't hit critical mass where you can throw like a Command Fest event and you're going to have 800 people show up to play CDH. That just isn't the reality right now. You can get like the maximum, you can get like 250 people, 250 to 300 people, I think, if you really, really pushed it. But that's kind of the limit right now. And I think before proxy lists can really be a thing, we need to be hitting 500, 600 people at events, and it needs to be that popular before it can really work.
I mean, if you obviously I'm a tournament grinder and I play in Discords with mostly tournament grinders. And if you look at the decks people are playing when we're doing spell table games, even at least half are proxy decks. We're CDH, it's not like standard. It's not like modern where the cards are constantly being reprinted. Obviously there are some that are, but we are very much a reserve list heavy format. We play the duels. Mm-hmm. Every deck has Mox Diamond. A lot of them have LED. Some play fucking Time Twister. A lot of them play Grim Monolith, Gilded Drake, Transmute Artifact. All of these incredibly expensive cards that cannot be reprinted. And if the format got to a place where the reserve list was no longer a concern and the cards were affordable and the format was accessible, especially because, keep in mind, we're playing a 100 card format, not a 60 card format. You need a lot of different cards. So like CDH decks are just too expensive. So I think that putting us into a place where we were proxyless, like you said, it can exist, and SCG cons exist, and they are doing really, really well lately. They've been improving how they've been running things. People are really enjoying the events from everything I've heard in the last couple versus the ones before the last few. And those are proxyless events that get at least 100 people every time, and it seems like it's good and going well, and I'm totally open to all of that stuff existing. But yes, the concern of WOTC getting to a place of being the dominant player in organizing CDH and making it really focused on being a proxyless format, I can't see that as being realistic with the growth of the format. Because what I love,
the format.
It would kill it. It would kill it. Well, it would kill our growth rate. I don't think it would kill the format. It would kill our growth rate. And what I really like right now is the growth rate of CDH, because all the people that I've convinced to get into CDH from any recent memory, from playing my decks at LGSs or whatever, what really clicks the light bulb in their head every single time is I say, oh, just print out a deck. And they're like, what do you fucking mean, print out a deck? And I'm like, spend $30, get a proxy deck or print it out on pieces of paper. None of us give a fuck, because we're not here to play against your wallet.
Right. Right. I think that's the biggest key. The thing is, there's so many people. This is me being the old man here, real quick for a second. I'm in my mid 40s. I've worked at the same company for almost 20 years now. I'm married. I got 3 kids. I'm in a very different place than a lot of these 20, 21, 22-year-old kids who are just getting out of college or are still in college and trying to play this format, right? It is not reasonable or even close to reasonable to expect that those people are going to be able to buy a Time Twister, or going to be able to even buy, their dual lands. It's just too expensive.
A Mana Crypt, dude. A Mana Crypt is $100-something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's just not realistic or reasonable. And I have zero interest in beating people because I can afford expensive cards. That's not why I play this format. I play this format because I want my brain against their brain. I don't want my brain and my wallet against their lack of wallet. That's just I'll go play something else. That's just not interesting to me. So, if you were to make it so that you couldn't do proxies, all of those people who are these young, brilliant minds would be dropped out of the format, and effectively, or they'd be, handicapped. And I have no interest in that. So I think, WOTC being involved is a good thing to a point, right? We want them involved. We want some events to exist that WOTC's involved with, but we need to be very careful about not letting them, have any kind of dominance or control of the format. Because as soon as that happens, it's like, it's a real problem. Talk to me again in like 5 years. In 5 years, if we have like 1,000 people showing up for events, then all of a sudden the incentive is there. I think inevitably proxyless will become a thing whether we like it or not. But right now we're not anywhere close to that.
On a separate note, one of my other fears of WOTC getting too involved in CDH is, look at the progression of Commander, right? Where it was this fun format that was just using the existing card pool, and then WOTC got involved with Commander and made it a real format. And now WOTC specifically prints cards for Commander, and it's kind of really changed the format to being about the cards they specifically printed for Commander. So WOTC getting into CDH also concerns me on the idea that they might print some cards specifically because of CDH viability, and I worry if they start doing that, it's gonna just turn into a really busted format even more. Like, it's already, we're playing in a high power busted format, but if they start printing cards specifically designed for CDH that are pushed, that could be pretty game warping and concerning.
Or the other way around, if they they start banning cards without really having knowledge of the format, which one of the things about CDH that's different than modern or standard is we get really attached to our decks. Like, we spend a lot of time and money blinging them out, and and if suddenly WOTC came along and banned a couple of cards that were, number one, very expensive, and number two, killed your pet deck completely,
fuck,
and all of a sudden, yeah. Well, Dockside isn't that, isn't even that bad. Yeah,
we're not having this conversation again.
What I mean is, it's not that bad in terms of cost wise, right? Exactly.
But we say that, but it's still like a $50-$60 card. Like, it's not like it's actually
cheap. Imagine they banned something like Lion's Eye Diamond, which is like a $600 card right now.
400. Yeah.
Is it 400? Mm-hmm. Okay. I don't know how much it is, but in any case, it's multiple hundreds of dollars. So they go and they ban LED, and you have all these people who invested a shit ton of money into LED. You have decks that become a lot weaker without LED, and your pet deck becomes unviable. This is what happens in Modern, by the way, all the time. It's one of the reasons I stopped playing it. Because you go and you build this, beautiful blue-white control deck, and then they either print something that's so busted that that deck becomes no longer viable, or they ban something that makes the deck no longer viable, and like all that money's fucking gone. And that happened all the time. That happens all the time in Modern. Right, so if that happened in CDH, talk about money invested, like for the people who aren't proxying, it's disastrous. So yeah, I think that's a valid fear and terrifying, frankly. Yeah. All right. We spent enough time. We got to move on.
Okay.
So this is a great one for you. One for you.
Mal says, "Do you have a trick in politics when you talk to people that makes them not blow you off and care what you have to say?" Ooh, am I giving away the coaching secrets now? Talk no jutsu is a very important thing to do appropriately. No, it's, I would say the biggest keys to politics are being respectful, like being calm, and not being overly emotional and flustered and aggressive, because that like makes people inherently trust what you're saying less and just makes your words go in one ear out the other. I think it's really important to give credit to the decisions that are being made. So like examples I can give are, let's say, someone's got a Magd on board and I've got my Kinnan on board, and someone's just like, I don't like Kinnan, I'm gonna swords your Kinnan. I'm like, hey, can we talk about that for a sec before you actually do that? And I say like, okay, I 100% see the value in you targeting Kinnan here. I get what you're trying to do. You're worried about me having mana and activations. I get that. I'm not saying this plate doesn't have value, but also consider the factors that like there's a Magd on board, there's other creature combo decks here. That's a piece of removal that we might need to stop a win attempt, and this is a little bit preemptive. If you have more interaction in your hand where you feel that you can deal with anything else anyone does, by all means, if this is what you think the correct play is, go for it. But just consider those factors and think if that might be the best thing to do right now, or you might be opening someone a window. I think it's just being respectful, being calm. Don't ever discredit what people are doing and tell them what they're doing is wrong. I think it's more important to just ask them to look at the whole situation, because like I've had a lot of games where someone just fires off a swords preemptively my Kinnan because they say I don't fucking like Kinnan, and then whatever other creature deck just wins, and that swords would have stopped them, but because the swords was used, they're like, great, I can just win now. So preemptively interacting can be a hard thing, but that has nothing to do with politics, which was the question. The question about politics is just like give people credit for what they're trying to do, have those conversations, give the context of the game, be respectful, like definitely be respectful.
I think a big thing that I've learned, this is more recent, I think, is give other people the opportunity to say what they need to say, like support them in speaking. So, you'll constantly run into situations where you'll have one player who's in exactly the situation that I think the person who asked this question is describing, where they want to talk, they have some ideas, they want to, influence what's going on, and they keep getting sort of pushed away and no one's listening to them. So taking the time to call that out, say, hey, what do you think? And listening to them and hearing what they have to say and discussing it with them, respectfully, will build some rapport with them so that later in the game, when you want to speak, they'll be more likely to support you and listen to what you have to say. So that kind of give and take, I think, goes a long way. The other thing is, say that you want to speak and then wait. Like you don't like, people will talk, and you're like, hey guys, I have something to say. So finish what you have to say, and then I'd like to talk, right? And pause and like give people a chance to finish what they're saying, and then take your window and speak. And don't be afraid to push back. If people start talking over you when you've claimed that window, say, hey, look, this is my turn. I gave you guys a chance. Now it's my turn to speak, and here's what I think, and talk through it. Right? I think those are my tips, I think.
Yeah, no, and I agree with that fully. And I mean, people who have played games with me, for sure, like I am known as a yapper, and I definitely talk a lot. But when I'm talking to people, it is a conversation. Like, I'm not just talking over everything everyone does. I'm having conversation. I'm explaining my thought process and asking questions. And I'm giving them the space to answer back.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
All right, next question. Okay, so this is my boy Jelly, who's a Florian player.
One of the three.
Well, I think we're up to 4 now.
So proud of you.
Maybe even 5.
I think I did 5 Obnixilis coaching sessions this last week. Just fucking like
what can I tell you? All right. So, if you were building 4 decks to introduce new players to CDH, what 4 decks would you choose and why? That's an interesting one.
I'm down to answer this, but I want one caveat on it. I don't think you should do only 4 decks. I think, because I imagine if you're going to do this, you're going to proxy them up. So you're probably just going to do like a make playing cards order or print them out. I would do at least 6 decks, because you don't want every pod to be identical. I think that if you're just playing the exact same 4 decks against each other over and over again, that's going to be good for learning those decks in that pod. And you're going to understand the play patterns of that pod, but I think that's going to actually discredit, and not discredit, it's going to skew your decision making in other pods, because you're going to be so used to a certain type of game. So I think having a little bit of variability in the pods is actually very, very important. So not every game is kind of on repeat. So I would try and have at least 6 decks, so you're filtering some things in and out.
Yeah. So you read it as, like, you create a pod for 4 new players, basically.
Yeah.
And you have 4 decks to put in the pod. Yeah, I totally agree with that then. Yeah. You definitely want more than 4.
But I think
if you wanted 4 decks if you put it the other way around, you have like a new player, you're like, here's 4 decks for you to like test and learn CDH with. I think, what 4 decks would you pick?
I think it would be good to have a variability strategy. So I think I would give them one really proactive focus deck, one thing that's just trying to send it, which you also have a choice here. Do you want to just give them the best decks at what each of these archetypes do, or do you want to give them something that just fits into an archetype? You know what I mean? So if you're talking like a turbo proactive deck, you could give them Rogsai, but also a lot of the other decks are probably going to have blue for other strategies. So you could say, okay, let's give you a Sans blue turbo deck. Maybe we give you something like Timid Dargo. You learn about being explosive. You learn about your breach lines. You learn about, how to grind value when you're not winning the game on turbo and not just doing it in a heuristic study way. I could see Timid Dargo as being a really good proactive deck to give them. Giving them a couple of mid-range decks. I think mid-range is definitely the fruitful most there's the most of them in the format. And don't just give them blue farm. Give them some stuff that really just focuses on grinding that advantage and then finding its window. You could give them one that leans a little more proactive. You could do something like Dargo Thras, that's kind of mid-range quicker combo, very, very opportunistic. And you could do something that's a little bit slower in the mid-range. Don't want to just say Kinnan, because I think there's other options. That Kinnan's like very specific knowledge. You could give them something like, what would be mid-range but a little bit slower leaning? Do you have any ideas for that?
Mid-range but slower leaning. I mean,
like Kinnan's the first one that comes to my brain for like slower mid-range.
Yeah. I mean, I would look at Thrasios decks. I mean,
Dargo Thras.
Yeah, but I don't know about Dargo. Dargo Thras is almost too fast in power.
Timna Thras?
I wouldn't do Timna Thras. I would not recommend Timna Thras to a new player right now, but I would run maybe Thrasios.
What about
Smasher?
What about a Traxa?
I would not recommend Atraxa to someone right now.
Sure. Well, it doesn't have to be the best deck.
I would do Tivit, maybe. Tivit would be a good one.
That's very controlled. So I was going to recommend Talion as one of the decks. But
I would not recommend Talion to a new player. I would. So my recommendations would be Blue Farm, Tivit, right? And Blue Farm gives you. I know it's boring, whatever.
So boring.
But it gives you every element of the CDH format for the most part, like other than non-creature combos, right? So I would do Blue Farm, I would do Tivit, I would do something explosive monocolor. So I would do either like Crick or Magda, or maybe a Tali as an option.
No, because Atali is so 100%. Random. I don't think you want to give a new player Crick. I don't think Magda's. I don't know. I don't like Magda.
I would totally give them one, but it's not something. It's not like it's not their only deck, right? It's something for them to play around with and experience. I would also do a creature based deck, so I would do like something like Sisay or Rocco, or something that is completely built around creature combos, because I want them to experience it. Kinnan. Although Kinnan, I think, is the hardest one for a new player to learn, but it's a good one. Yeah, so those are all possibilities. I would absolutely never, fucking ever give them a Krark deck or a Tayam deck. It's not going to do it.
Yeah, no, fuck time. But I think the idea is giving decks that fit the spectrum of the speed of the format.
Yes.
So something really fast, something fast in combo but can grind mid-range, something middle ground mid-range, something mid-range leaning more control-y, something that's control leaning stacks, and then maybe one stacks deck. Like having those 6 so your pods have that diversity of playstyle, I think would be.
I really do think it's important though that you should have a Fringe deck in the mix just to experience something completely different, a different way of approaching the game.
Teshar.
So, okay, Teshar, sure. Teshar, Magda, Crick, any of those are interesting. Urza, all possible. All right, next question. Sammy, if you had to design a new green card that wasn't broken in half but made the color worth running more, how would you design and balance it?
Card advantage. Esper Sentinel version of green. Whenever an opponent plays a creature spell, they pay 1 or you draw a card.
1,000%.
I want that card.
1,000%.
That card
yes.
should exist.
100%.
Yeah.
Green needs card
if you want a green card that is worth running, it has to be a card that gives card advantage. That is exactly what we need right now. It needs to be a cheap, efficient card that gives consistent card advantage, something you can mulligan for and play around with. That is that is what we need.
100%. The only alternative to that would be negative card advantage. If it was a green powerful card that negated everyone else's card advantage, that would also be acceptable.
Sure. I mean, that might lean you more into like oof style stack strategies, which I think green already does kind of well. It has there's a lot of green cards that are really good for slow decks. You know what I mean? Like if we're talking the oof strategies, the root maze strategies, like green is really good at artifact hate, really good at shutting things down, really good at stompy fighting removal. Like it's good at the slower things. But what green is not good at is being fast. And I think we need something that pushes green to be a little bit quicker, because the format has leaned to this efficient, proactive pace. And so I think green needs cards that fit into that space, and I think the best way to give that is card advantage. Or I mean, if you really care about the color pie a lot and you're just like, green isn't a card advantage color, and I get that, it's kind of an explosive card advantage color for like equal to power, and there are those cards that exist, whatever. You could also go something else that's kind of ridiculous mana advantage, maybe give green a actual ritual. Like giving green something like a dark writ, like a fruitful ritual or something, it seems a little busted. I do not want that in eternal formats. But I could see like if you give green a dark writ, I don't think that's the worst thing for CDH.
Yeah, I'd like to see a Hull Breacher be printed in green.
That would be
pretty hot.
I mean, I would love that. A non-human green creature for Kinnan that gives me treasures.
Just
and want to draw cards. Jesus Christ, bro!
It doesn't need to create treasures. Just have it create forests.
Right, but
create forests.
But generically, like I create forests. I don't think we want to give green more slowdown cards. I don't think that's what increases green's overall viability, because that's the green decks that people are playing, except for Kinnan, obviously, and except for the decks that are using green just for creature tutors, which if you're looking at like Bruce Thras, Dargo Thras, like the point is to get Dockside. Taking away Kinnan and taking away creature tutor side of green. Like we want, if you're giving green a way to be more competitive and proactive, I think it has to be card advantage.
If you look at every deck that runs green, what does green need to be good? It needs another color that gives a card advantage. That's what it needs.
Yeah.
Period. Every time. It also has shitty removal. That's another thing that I think green could use is better removal. Yeah. That's another thing. But yeah, those two things are really what it's missing, and which is why it's really hard to play mono green. I think generally speaking, you just. Just not explosive enough. I mean, although
Zavala.
there are some. Yeah, I was gonna say
Zavala's wild, bro.
Yeah. All right. Next question. Moving on. You do the next one.
Sure. Let me look. Which snack is most suitable to eat while playing from Fighter Ogre?
Not Cheetos.
Yeah, so generally, not anything you have to eat with your fingers, and if you have to eat it with your fingers, it can't leave residue on your fingers. So like,
smoothies.
I'll eat.
Smoothies are good.
I am a big smoothie guy. Smoothies are really good. I think like anything you can eat in a bowl with a fork or a spoon, that's not, like saucy noodles flinging sauce on your cards. Like that's anything that's like normal fucking food. You want to eat fucking granola and yogurt, that's great. I've done that a bunch of times. I used to have, whenever I was living in Costa Rica, my tournament tradition was in between top 16 and top 4. I would have a tuna poke bowl. Because every Saturday at the Saturday market we get some fresh tuna and Magic cards seems like such a terrible idea.
Oh, I'm sorry. Then again, like
fresh tuna caught the day before in Costa Rica. You're gonna tell me that's not a good idea? Because that shit was delicious.
Seems like a terrible idea. Seems like
fucking marinated tuna, some sushi rice, avocado, some spicy mayo, my guy, mango, pineapple.
You're talking my language. It all sounds delicious, but I just don't want it on my Magic cards.
It wasn't on my Magic cards because I ate it in a bowl.
Stinky, little fishy smell on the Magic cards.
Fresh tuna does not have a stinky fishy smell.
It does if you leave the residue on the cards for long enough. It does get that stinky residue.
How would I get residue on the cards when I'm eating it out of a bowl with a fork or chopsticks? I use chopsticks.
Okay. Yeah. So don't spill it anywhere. Be careful.
Yeah. Don't be. But that's the idea. Just eat snacks that don't get on your cards. Just don't get it on your hands and don't get it on your cards.
Although I feel like every time I play with like Malcolm and Jorman, we're always eating burritos. So which is a terrible idea.
It's a terrible idea. Anyway. Really bad idea.
Yeah.
But that's why you triple sleep though, so who cares, right?
Not triple, but perfect hards and Hyper Phoenix on the outside.
Fucking might as well be triple sleep. That shit is enormous.
It might as well be. Yeah, they're fucking giant piles. Yeah.
And then you look at Nastrom's deck. Nastrom has hard inners and triple sleeved.
Yeah, that's wild. That's wild.
I have to shuffle his deck in 2 parts. I can't do it.
Yeah. All right. Next, and of course this comes from Nick Foles. Favorite sports team, all-time player, and what memory brings you the most joy? You go first.
Oh,
for me.
My favorite sports team is you're fucking DC boy. I'm so sorry. My favorite sports team is the New England Patriots, who are not good right now, but we have put you all in your place for a very long time. My favorite all-time player is Thomas Edward Brady Jr. Because he gave me all of the joy I could ever ask for in the world as a child. Being from Boston, I was a spoiled little brat because I went to college in Ohio. I was like, what do you guys mean you don't know about winning? I've had like 17 championships since I was born. And then my favorite sports memory probably was when I was finishing up high school at boarding school, and I was in Idaho. And at this time, everyone in Idaho is a Seahawks fan because that's their closest sports team. And there was the Super Bowl against the New England Patriots and the Seattle Seahawks. And I was watching this game at boarding school. And I was just having people shit talk me and scream at me the entire game as I sat there calmly as the only Patriots fan in the room. And then with 18 seconds left on the clock, I got to flip them all off and tell them to get fucked. And that felt great.
Why did they not run Marshawn Lynch, man? Why did they not run Lynch?
Well, the thought process is with 18 seconds left. As long as it's an incompletion, then you get 2 more plays. If you only do a running play first and it doesn't get there, you might only get 1 more play. So, there's a little bit of thought there.
You feed the man some Skittles and let him score a fucking touchdown and move on with your life. Come on.
Tell me about your fucking shithole of a favorite sports team.
Okay. So you think I'm simple. You think I'm really simple. But here's the thing, right? I love football. But the reason I love football is because I grew up in the 90s. And in the 90s, there was this dude named Barry Sanders. And Barry Sanders is the greatest football player to ever play the game.
You're a Lions fan?
If you don't believe me, I have long-term love for the Lions. I was born and raised in the DC area, so I'm forced to be a Commanders fan against my will. But I grew up, watching the Lions.
Interesting.
In the 90s.
I did not know you were a Lions fan. That is new knowledge for me. That's cool.
Yeah. And unlike Tom Brady, where he just fucking won a million championships, poor Barry Sanders had to run behind a shitty line for his whole career and never won basically anything.
What an excuse.
So love Barry Sanders. But my favorite experience or favorite moment, I'm gonna cheat here, is like, so I used to have season tickets to the Redskins, and I used to go to every single game every single season, and we'd show up at the park at like 7:30 in the morning, and we'd tailgate all day, and we had 50, 60 people at these tailgates. We had we would cook gourmet cuisine suited to the city of the team that was visiting. So like we had amazing cheesesteaks. We had for Philly we had gumbo and jambalaya for when New Orleans came to town.
You didn't make crawfish etouffee?
Oh, we did in fact have.
You had crawfish etouffee. That shit is so good. That shit is so
yes.
good.
Yes, yeah. So my favorite moments were those, and like the people who I tailgate with, I still have a text chain going back, even though we haven't tailgated in like 10 years now. We still talk to each other all the time. So, yeah, hell yeah.
So what was the exact moment where the Redskins became so trash that you stopped paying for season tickets?
Okay, so I don't remember what year it was, but it was a Monday night game where Michael Vick was playing for the Philadelphia Eagles and was scoring at will, and it was halftime, and it started to rain, and it was cold, and I'm like, what the fuck am I doing here? And that was it. That was the moment. I said, this is stupid, and I gave up my season tickets and moved on with my life.
Hilarious. That was for the record, that was not a planned question. I'm glad that you immediately knew the answer to that.
Oh, I remember the exact moment. Yeah. I remember the feeling. I remember the rain falling on me and feeling like, what the fuck am I doing here?
Yeah.
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 All right. I think we can skip the next two questions because we already answered them, right? What does green need to become a staple? I think we did that.
Yeah.
Our fringe deck's worth playing. We did that.
Yeah. If you woke up as the new lead for the Commander Rules Committee, what would be the first thing you do? Could be ban list related, philosophy related, organizational, whatever. By Dohas.
Interesting question. What would be the first thing that you would do?
Ban Dockside.
I know. No, I would not fucking ban Dockside.
I fucking hate Dockside, dude. It's so dumb. Philosophically, I would start considering CDH as a format. And I think that there's a lot of cards in CDH that, you could talk about banning or talk about unbanning that really don't have effect on casual. And I think that that's something to really consider. Like, I'm not, I don't want to say ban specific cards, but I think, like, if something becomes a problem in CDH, like, if we get to a point that, Dockside is an issue or Heuristic Study really is an issue, those are cards that shouldn't be seeing playing casual anyway. And I think that the philosophy I would enable is, like, we can consider this as part of the format and we can consider it for bans and adjustments and stuff like that. I think organizationally, I would try and have a lot more people be involved with the rules committee. I would want people from all the different stretches of Commander as a format. I would definitely want more CDH people involved, but I also wouldn't just want to like have one person from CDH and say, cool, we have CDH covered. Like, I want people who play different types of CDH, people who are focused on the content creation side of CDH, the some people who are just tournament grinders, but some people who play like only turbo, some people who really focus on slower control. Like, hear those opinions, get that diversity of experience involved to really make the correct decisions, because like obviously I want Dockside banned, but just because I hate Dockside and I think it's a broken thing for the format, if I have 7 other people who are heavily involved in CDH and that rules committee from all stretches of the spectrum of styles of play in CDH, and 6 out of the 7 are like, no, I think Dockside's really important for the format and it's not something we should ban. Like, just because I hate the card doesn't mean that, and I'm one CDH person doesn't mean it should be banned. So like having that diversity of experience, like really making it a little more democratic to make sure that everyone is satisfied to the best of the ability, I think would be a good thing to do. But consider CDH as a part of Commander and don't just ignore it for the sense of casuals.
Yeah, I think what you need is a much higher level of engagement. I mean, you really need basically kind of a subcommittee, and you need to find a group of active CDH players. Like, not just, don't pick 1 or 2, pick a whole group of them. And probably the easiest way to do it is like, Datatog has his ELO ranking, so you can see people who are actively playing CDH right now, and you want to pull their opinions from that group of people. You probably also need to be extensively testing things, right? It's not enough to say, hey, we should ban Dockside. Like, actually put a group together and go test what it's like to play CDH without Dockside and see if it's possible. You know, have people think through, like, how would it change the decks that are in the meta right now? Like, that kind of analysis is sorely lacking. There's been a lot of people who've put some proposals together and ideas together of ways to do this, you know, that involve, you know, much larger segments of the community. You know, if you want to go ask someone, go ask Zen. Zen has had a whole bunch of ideas. You know, a lot of them are just really hard to implement, but, you know, the first thing I would do is, like, put some people together to actually start, you know, doing that level of analysis that just isn't being done right now. You know, and yes, I appreciate, you know, Jim from the Spike Feeders. I appreciate Rebel. You know, they're, you know, the only reason I'm not in a state of panic about the rules committee every single time, you know, an announcement comes out. But there needs to be a lot more engagement than that. Places to find good practice games online. So this is a tricky question because a lot of the really good Discords are invite only.
Yeah.
So you won't be able to, if you're new to the format, you're not gonna be able to just jump in and go, you know, play in some of these more exclusive Discords. But you can, you know, there's the Reddit CDH Discord. There's our Discord. There's Chaos has a Discord league. Those are all great places to go and start playing and get some practice in.
Play to win
and then,
as well.
You know, play to win. Absolutely. Those are all good places to go and sort of prove your mettle. And as you play against players, you have a good attitude. People enjoy playing with you. You know, show that you're capable. You'll find you'll get invites to some of those more exclusive servers and find yourself playing, you know, with more of the tournament grinders. But it takes a little bit of time. You kind of have to work your way into that.
Yeah, but I mean, there's nothing wrong. Like, if you're entering into the format, starting in a place with players who are in a similar ground to you, like, there's pros and cons to that, you know. But just be fun, be respectful. Don't be too sweaty.
Yeah, and like, yeah, I mean, that's really it. Like I think the biggest qualifier for getting invited to those places is not being an asshole.
Yeah, pretty much.
If people have a good experience with you, then that's the most likely indicator of you getting into those places.
And some of them are attitude, some of them are tournament result as well. Like there are some servers where, like, you do need to have tournament results to have proven your mettle a little bit. But yeah.
Okay, moving on. So my boogas. Could you maybe outline the steps for getting into CDH? And this kind of dovetails into what we just talked about, like how to get into, you know, Discords and so on. But for me, like, you're already making the first step. You're listening to this video. So you're hearing about what's going on in CDH on a pretty regular basis from us. You know, and we are, I think, both of us really plugged into the environment and the community right now. So what you're hearing from us is what's going on in the CDH community, so that's good. I highly recommend looking around for events, and I would not hesitate to jump into, like, some of these smaller local events that are going on. You know, get your deck put together, get some practice in on the Discords, and then just go. Yeah, you try it out, experience what it's like.
You have to just play games. Like, that's really what it is. Because even and just recognize there's nothing wrong with losing. Like it's not going to ruin your life if you lose a bunch of games at first, because in all of those losses you're learning and you're going to develop as a player, and you just have to take that step and take that leap. And it will sometimes be a rocky, rough start, but as long as you're with nice people who, and also, like, especially if you're new to the format, like, say that when you go into a game, just say, hey, like, these are, you know, I'm just getting into the format right now. Don't necessarily tell people to, like, explain everything during the game. Different people learn different ways. If you'd rather talk about decisions during the game, it's fine. But like, always say, I would say, if we could talk about some things after the game just to help me learn a little bit, I would really appreciate that. And my experience ever playing with someone who says something like that, the response from everybody at the table is always like, absolutely, would love to help. It's a really nice community. It's a community full of people who love to hear themselves talk. So like, they will happily give you as much information as they want. And same thing, like, if you're playing against new decks and you haven't seen how a combo works before, ask someone to explain it. They will literally say, oh, absolutely. And they will fucking, like, put out all the cards and explain to you how the combo works right in front of you. And now you know how that combo works. Like, ask for information, ingest that information, play those games, meet those people. You'll build a community around yourself, and it'll just happen. You know, none of us started just by one day waking up and being like, I'm a tournament grinder now. Like, I fucking just hopped on the Reddit Discord and started playing games, and then hopped into Play to Win Discord and started playing games, and then decided to play in a tournament. Like, it's a natural discourse.
Yep. Okay, and I think this is probably going to be the last question. This is from E7EN. I don't know, is it Essen? I don't know how to say it. But,
even? I don't know.
Even? Yeah, maybe even. Okay, and this is a great question. What would need to happen for two-color commanders to finally become... Is it two-color commanders? Or two-color partners?
Two-color partners.
Yeah, two-color partners to finally become obsolete, or rather just, quote, another option rather than the dominant option. You think this can be fixed, or is Tymna Kraum Thrasios a mistake forever? Yeah, that's a tough one. I think it's forever.
So it is. Actually, there was one question we didn't put it on this list, but someone mentioned an idea for like 2-color or partner commanders in general. That actually, I immediately read that and I was like, that's kind of a cool idea. Which was, if you start with partners, should you start with 1 less card in hand?
Oh,
and
wow.
That was very interesting to me. Because I was like, okay, then you actually get access to the same number of cards as everyone else to start the game. It is not a resource disadvantage. It is actually a resource equivalent, because the whole point of why partners are so good is not just access to more colors, but also just you are starting the game essentially with more cards in hand than everyone else. So I actually think that that's a potentially very good balancing fix where, like, okay, cool. You are playing Blue Farm. You're playing Tymna Kraum. Your first hand is 6. And your free mull is 6, and then your first mulligan takes you to 5. And so you starting essentially just like, 1 card down for the fact that you have an extra card in your command zone. And I think that that is potentially the best fix I've ever heard.
You know, I would dovetail that with, you know, fixing the 4th seat problem as well. Like, because there's so much disadvantage to being 4th seat.
That's a separate question. It's a separate question.
It is, but it's the same answer, right? It's the same answer. Like, you're playing partners, you play 1 card down. You're in 4th seat, you get 1 more card. That's how I would do it.
Maybe. I mean, sure. But like, how else would you fix partner commanders?
I don't think you can unless you push harder, right? The only way to displace them is to have even more powerful options as commanders, and that power creep is terrifying.
But what would you do to fix it?
It's a good idea.
What do you think would fix it without printing something more busted?
Nothing. I don't think there's a fix.
Not just going.
They're too powerful.
Down? You don't like that?
But it's not enough. It's not enough.
You don't think that's enough?
Like
I actually think that would be huge for the format. I really liked that idea.
Sure. It's not it's a fine idea. I don't have a problem with it, but I don't think it's enough to fix the problem. Right? You're still going to mulligan aggressively. You just start with 6 instead of 7.
Right.
You still get your free mull. Just one less card. But I think
it's a big difference.
No, the problem is having a card in the command zone that you can count on is better than a 7th random card.
Depends, because if you look at a lot of partners, it depends on a partner deck, right? Where when you're looking at something like Tymna Kraum, because you have such good card advantage in the command zone, you're mulliganing for other card advantage if you can get the better versions in Esper, Mystic, or you're mulliganing for mana to start your other plans with Tymna and Kraum. Like, that's kind of your game plan. So having 1 less card makes you a little bit weaker on the average mana advantage. And I think that that's fairly significant. Or it makes you start with 1 less piece of interaction in hand, which makes the game slightly less likely to go long, which is something that you want it to do because you're a deck that gains continuous advantage. You cultivate situations where you just keep drawing more cards and then you go over the top. So I think weakening both of those axes of you have slightly less mana on average or you have slightly less interaction on average because you have 2 cards in your command zone, I think that that's a really effective fix that weakens those types of strategies. And it sucks.
Here's the problem, though. Go ahead.
Well, it sucks. It sucks for
what I was going to say.
Weaker partner decks. Like if you're playing like Yoshimaru Thrasios, you know what I mean?
Yes, that's the problem.
But that's fine. I do think there needs to be some kind of downside to playing partners. Like that is the fix, because right now there's no downside to playing partners. Right. But if you look at partner commanders on average, they are low CMC, they are multiple colors, they are powerful enough that they should just be commanders on their own half the fucking time. So it's like there's no downside right now. It becomes objectively almost correct unless you're doing just super busted like Kinnan or Cedh. You know what I mean? So
but here's the problem. So the advantage that you're talking about with the extra card in the command zone doesn't apply to all partners. It applies to specifically 3 commanders, right? Tymna, Kraum, and Thrasios. That's it. Because all the other ones are like if you're playing if you're playing Roger and Silas does nothing, right? Silas offers absolutely no advantage to the deck whatsoever, right? It's all Roger.
He is a legendary artifact for Mount Doom. Don't discredit that man.
Yeah, surrender. But so it would completely destroy any partner strategies outside of those 3, right? Going down to 6 cards for Rogsai would be disastrous. Going down to
we were just talking about Rogsai as maybe one of the best decks in the format, like top 3. What is wrong with hindering them?
Well, you just want to neuter them because they're too powerful?
That's not neutering. Yes, it is. It's nerfing to an extent. It lowers the power level of partners. Right, but if we're saying that two color commanders
for Rogside, there's no reason to nerf them. They don't have an extra like valuable commander in the command zone. Like Tymna Crom, yes, Tymna Crom, both you know, huge advantage to having Tymna and Crom in the command zone. There's no real advantage to having Rog and Silas in the command zone. There's just advantage to having Rog.
There is advantage to having
black
Rog.
colors.
There is advantage to having Rog and Silas in the command zone. It's because of the colors. You are gaining the color identity of Silas. That is advantage. That is something that he has objectively provided you. Is he as a card you want to play very good? No. But if you're looking at fixing partners as a mechanic to not be objectively correct to do a lot of the time, obviously there's exceptions, there's lots of non-partner commander viability, but like if you look at a lot of the top decks, a lot of them are partners, and if we're saying that there should potentially be some type of fix that makes them a little more even with the rest of the format, I think that because you get an extra card, losing a card is a really good fix. That's just a decision you have to make now. If you say I want to play Tymna Tana, even though Tana sucks, I should lose a card because I'm gaining the colors of Tana.
Yeah, I'm 100% against that. I think because it would kill partner commanders outside of the partner commanders that you're targeting. Because really, the only ones you're really targeting here are Tymna, Crom, and Thrasios, and everyone else is an outlier. So the exception in this case destroys the rule. Like it's just not. It doesn't work. You know, I don't think there's a fix for it. I think unless you were straight up ban Tymna. If you ban Tymna, then it would fix everything. But you know, that's never gonna happen.
Ban Tymna.
I love fucking Tymna, so don't ban it. But like, if you banned it, would solve the part.
Tymna is the best commander ever printed of all time.
100%. It's not even close.
It's not even close. Yeah.
It's not even close. I mean, number 2 would be Florian, but it's a pretty distant number 2. Okay, all right. Well, these were fun. I had a good time. These are. I like doing these Q&As. We'll have to do this again. You know, maybe every few months or so we can do it again.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you wanna take us out, Max?
Yeah, thank you so much for listening to the Colors Are Crutch podcast. My name is Max Sternberg, also known as Wounded Satellite, and I was joined by my sexy beast of a co-host, Max P, the Florian guy. If you're interested in CDH coaching, that's something I offer. You can hit me up on Discord or Twitter, both as Wounded Satellite. We can get that scheduled for you. If you enjoy our show, please do not forget to like and subscribe. If you want to support us even more and get all kinds of fun perks, we also have a Patreon you can find in the description below. And if you want to join the conversation outside of YouTube, we also have a Discord description, also in link below, where you can join us and, you know, have a bunch of fun conversations with us there. Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you next time. Appreciate you.